welcome to Watercolours with Caroline, and I'm Caroline. And today we're going to be painting some copper pots based on some photographs I took in a local antique store. This is quite a complicated composition, so I wanted to work that out on tracing paper first, and then I'm going to transfer it to my watercolour paper with graphite paper. Graphite paper is erasable, and it makes it a much easier way to do it, and you don't have to erase and plan on your watercolour paper. I've also made myself a colour chart to help me with the warm pinks and browns that I want to use for the copper. I have my reference photos, and I have also used masking fluid to mask off those bright white highlights on both the pots. And I'm going to work on one pot at a time. Take your time with everything. Don't be overwhelmed by trying to work on too much at once. I'm going to work on the far pot, and I've wet the pot down, and I'm going to put some azo yellow on to start with. You can use cadmium yellow, you can use Windsor yellow, you could use lemon yellow. Let's use a nice bright yellow. My favourite's azo. And I'm putting some raw sienna with that to get a more golden brown on the shadow side. Another one that I really love to use is quinacridone gold. You could also use that. It's a beautiful colour. Sometimes I forget I have it there sitting in my palette. It's so expensive that I tend not to use it very much, which is silly. It's a beautiful colour, and I should get used to using it more often. Now, I had to skip a little bit ahead, but I have done the same with the kettle, and I've added some vermilion and some cadmium red to the highlights. And now I'm working on the second layer. The first layer is completely dry, and I'm working on the middle values with burnt sienna and permanent rose and a little cobalt blue just to grey the brown down a little bit. But remember, with copper, your browns need to be very warm. I've added permanent rose and vermilion or cadmium red to nearly all the browns that I've mixed to keep that beautiful pinky colour to the copper. I want some very sharp shadows on the right hand side of the lid of the pot, so I'm working on dry paper, and on the left hand side I wet the paper a little bit so I had a softer shadow. And of course the top of the pot is the lightest place, and I'm using a thirsty brush, a clean brush, to lift out some of the colour. I checked my reference photo and figured that my values were just a little bit too dark. Now I'm adding ultramarine blue with permanent rose, cadmium red, and I'm going to darken the shadow under the lip of the pot. When I'm working, I tried to keep my reference photo right there. I look at it all the time. And if I'm working from life, if it's a live model, if I'm doing a portrait or life drawing, I just look at them. You should look at them more often than you look at your paper. That is the rule. Always looking to check your values, to check your colours, check your composition. You can see so much more if you look and look and look again. The more I looked, the more colour transitions I saw and value transitions in the reflections of the pot. I saw things I hadn't seen on the previous glance. And that is what makes your copper look realistic and shiny and reflective. And of course, not only do you want to make it look reflective and metallic, but you also have to make it look round. This was an extremely round pot. Beautiful, beautiful pot. And to get it to look round, you need to have the sides that are going away from you much darker than the part that comes out towards you, and that will give it a three-dimensional quality, make it look round. And again, I'm working with sometimes a hard edge for the reflection, means it's dry paper, or I want a soft edge for the reflection, which means I wet the paper either before or after I put the colour on. As you learn to control the water and the paint, you will just do it instinctively. Sometimes you'll add water before, sometimes you'll add water after. you will get to understand the nature of the paint and how much water it requires. And these dark colours, if you're mixing a dark colour, you need to have a lot of pigment and not very much water. And if you try to mix your pigment with lots of water on your brush, or you keep washing your brush, your darks will become washed out. They will never stay dark. And you need to keep mixing them more and more paint all the time. If you watch my paint palette, you can see that I'm constantly adding more colour to the little puddle of paint that I have. I don't use it until it's all gone and then wonder, what did I mix there? I just keep adding colour. It changes all the time. I might add some more permanent rose, I might add some more burnt sienna, I might add some more cadmium red. And one of the ones that's very useful that I have is Transparent Red Oxide by Daniel Smith. That is a beautiful, rich, reddish brown that came in very handy for painting the copper pots. And sometimes the shadows and reflections can be very complicated, so that's when you need to just slow down, take your time, work on a small section at once. Don't be fooled by my speed of painting. This is speeded up to 2 times normal speed. And unfortunately for you, and I'm sorry, I've had to cut out a lot of the steps because I can't upload long videos, so I have to keep them under 15 minutes, which means there's hours of my work that you don't get to see. Now the reflection from the handle on the pot was very, very red. I've mixed cadmium red and permanent rose. And at the moment that is a much darker value than the copper behind it, but that will change as I put in further layers of dark. And those are some of the things that you get to learn as you're doing watercolour, working light to dark. You have to remember that you're going to be making judgments about the value all the time. And I quite often it's very easy digitally to edit your photo and turn it black and white and really look at where the black and white and grey changes in value are, so that you're not confused by colour. We're very easily confused by colour, and we don't see the value, the true value that we should be seeing. So now I'm working on the kettle, and I'm putting quite a few permanent rose, cadmium red, vermilion reds into the background before I put on a second layer using various browns. I've got sepia, I got transparent red oxide, I've got Indian red, which is a very purplish opaque brown, quite lovely for doing the copper pots. And with all of them I've mixed the permanent rose and the cadmium red, sometimes vermilion. It's a good thing I have the video because I really don't remember what I do. It becomes instinctive as I move around my palette, just picking what I know should work. And what you need to remember is your blue colours will cool and grey down your brighter colours. So if you want to mix a colour that's not as bright or is a little bit greyed down or is a cooler colour, mix one of your blues in there. Cobalt blue, ultramarine blue. If you want a super, super strong dark phthalo blue, very intense, you won't be able to erase it or lift it. If you want a liftable colour, stick with cobalt and ultramarine. They're easy to lift. And see how red I have made, how warm I've made that part of the copper pot. Really warm. I've done that by adding cadmium red and permanent rose. And also I have the masking fluid on some of these highlights to help me preserve them. It's easy to get carried away with your painting and forget to preserve your highlights. And I do believe, I'm quite sure with this painting, I used my Dr. P.H. Martin's Bleed Proof White at the very end to claim back a few of those highlights that I lost And I'm going to a very, very dark layer. Mix burnt sienna with ultramarine blue, with cadmium red, with permanent rose, maybe even a little bit of transparent red oxide. And every layer you put on there gets darker and darker. But because it's transparent watercolour, even the dark layers show the other colours through them. The yellows you've put on there, the golds, the pinks, reds, they show through those dark layers and give them a beautiful, colourful intensity. You can't get that intensity just by putting your dark on straight away. It will look flat, it will lighten up, it will look light, it will be very frustrating. I checked my reference photo and found that it was lighter right there where I washed a little bit back. Thank you for watching. I hope your copper pots turn out well.